Good afternoon. I'm Emma Buckley-Lennox. On behalf of the Foundation for Young Australians, the Centre for New Public Education and OurSay, welcome to Student ShoutOut. For the past month, students from across Australia have been asked to think hard about what matters to them when it comes to their education, and really the response has been huge. 29,000 votes were cast across more than 100 questions, with about 4,500 young people joining this national conversation on education. And to answer the top questions today, we're joined by the Minister for School Education, Early Childhood and, of course, Youth, Peter Garrett. Welcome.
Yeah, thanks very much, Emma. It's great to be here.
Excellent. We'll go to our first question now. It comes from Corinda Hollis. With more than 4,000 votes for Corinda's question, it was third in the forum, and no doubt many students are going to be looking out for an answer. Go ahead, Corinda.
Thanks, Emma. My name is Corinda Hollis, and I attend Trinity Catholic College, Lismore. Minister Garrett, I believe all students should have equal opportunities in the classroom and that their individual learning needs should be met, but I don't see this present in the current education system. Minister Garrett, what do you believe you can do to ensure these equal opportunities are reflected in both curriculum and teaching methods so we continue to challenge poor practice and raise the standard of good practice?
Thanks very much, Corinda. Great question. And I'll try and do a brief answer because some of the things that I'll talk about may come into the other answers as well. So firstly, we're very focused on making sure that students are getting access to learning that is agreed to be at the world's best standard, which takes into account the kinds of things that they need to know in terms of the subjects that are being taught, but also is taught in such a way that picks up on whether they've got some challenges, need some support, or can be encouraged as they head through school. So that's why we've introduced a national curriculum, which has a number of subjects, the basic 4 subjects, English, Maths, Science and History, already being implemented in different states around Australia. It's why we've also looked very closely at what we think are important teacher qualifications and standards as well. So the teacher in the classroom can identify with the student that they need some support or perhaps a bit of guidance on how to learn well, and that all teachers have that same high level of knowledge and guidance. The final thing is that you will know about the Gonski panel and review into education funding, which was commissioned by the government in 2010. I won't speak at great length about it other than to say this is the first time that we've had a really good look at education funding and what we need to do as governments, plural, in spending money to make sure that everybody's educated well, and including in the terms of your question to me. What they have recommended to governments to consider is effectively funding an education system based on the needs of students in all schools, so all students in all schools. And that means that, say, for example, if a student has a disability or has issues around English language proficiency, maybe they've recently come into the country, that they're able to be well supported in the classroom as they're taught. Finally, just to say that in the national curriculum, we've got other things called capabilities. And they're things like ethical awareness and responsibility, your capacity to be able to be a well-rounded citizen when you leave school. And what we hope is that teachers, and expect, is that teachers will not only teach the subjects in the curriculum, but that also take into account those capabilities when they teach.
Corinda, would you like to ask a follow-up question at all?
No, thank you, Minister Garrett. I believe you answered my question there. Thank you.
Our next question comes via video, actually, from 2 Year 8 students in the Northern Territory, and it's on a trending topic that came out of the forum. It's on bullying, unfortunately, a big part of some students' education.
My name's Jack Lake and I'm a year 8 at Rosebery Middle School.
My name is Casey Myerscough and I am also a year 8 at Rosebery Middle School. We believe that bullying is a big problem over the internet and in our schools. We know this because both of us have been bullied before. We have witnessed both teachers and students being physically and verbally bullied at our school.
Minister Garrett, what can you do to give Australia's teachers and students a fair opportunity to stand up for themselves?
Thank you.
Look, thanks very much to you guys for that question from the NT. Look, this is a really big issue. And it's one that's become even more crucial with the use of basically social media, online devices, handheld phones, Facebook and the like, and you'll know texting and so on, and you'll know in your own school setting that people are communicating a lot more freely than they probably were when I went to school. In fact, definitely when I went to school. I've taken this issue pretty seriously since I've become minister, because it was one of the things that I knew about and I knew about it from just hearing it from friends and family and that sort of thing. And also because of these big pressures that are emerging because of the use of social media. So we've done a number of things. The first thing that we've done is make sure that we understand and recognise that it is an issue and it needs to be addressed. How can we do that? We've done a number of things. One of the things that we've done is we've initiated a National Day of Action against bullying and violence. And I launched that Day of Action 2 years ago now in Queensland because I felt it was really important for everybody to know that this was an important issue and that we needed to do something about it. We've also got quite a lot of information that's now available on a special website called Bullying No Way, the website. And that provides people with the kind of resources that they need, whether it's a teacher, a parent or a student who's experiencing bullying. Some of that's telling teachers what they need to do, what the guidelines are in managing a bullying incident. Some of it's telling parents how they ought to go about responding, how to have the conversation with their child if the child's being bullied. And some of it's for the kids themselves so that they know what support's available to them and the kind of responses to have in bullying. We've also got quite a lot happening from the government point of view for things like cyber safety. So we've got a cyber safety button and there's significant information, web-based information now, which we have in place to help people if they get into a bullying environment. Finally, the last thing to say is that there's a National Safe Schools framework which we've established, and we took advice from people who are really experts on bullying, who work in this area a lot. And we worked with schools and developed a framework that we expect every school to have in place so that no matter what school you're going to, some schools do have bullying policies and some schools know how to deal with it. Schools are ready to deal with it as well. Finally, I convened a special roundtable of health education experts. I had youth representatives there as well, which I really value, by the way. And we've got a number of projects underway to look at better ways of communicating both what it is about bullying that is completely unacceptable, how to manage it, how to address it, and also what kind of resources and support is there for students when it happens. You know, just to say one thing finally, I'm really alarmed that in schools sometimes people think it's still cool and it's not. And I'm really alarmed that quite often the person who's being bullied, it might be because they look different or maybe their sexual choices are different. And I think that as a nation, we really need to stand up to bullying. We need to, your generation of students is actually going to be really important in this, I think. Just sending out the message to everybody that it's absolutely not acceptable, and we're doing quite a lot. We want to do more, but it's a great question. It's such an important issue.
It's really good to hear an answer on that, Minister, because you know, it's obviously a really, really important issue for a lot of people, and hoping that all of the work that the government is doing will be working for them. On to our next question now. It's a video question. It comes from 2 Year 10 students in Melbourne and touches on something at the heart of the education debate right now, and that's funding equity.
Hi, my name is Alan Walden, and I'm in Year 10 at Northcote High School. Me and my friend Solly Miftari from Baldwin High formulated this question for Mr. Garrett as part of the Student ShoutOut program. Minister Garrett, education in Australia, and indeed the world, is a fundamental human right. Considering Australia has one of the strongest economies in the developed world, the massive disparity between schools, particularly public and private, in terms of funding, seems to be inequitable. We believe that a price is being put on education. Minister Garrett, what will you do to keep education as a human right and not a commodity?
Well, I absolutely agree with you, Alan. I think it is a human right, and we are doing a great deal to make sure that every student does have the opportunities that they have a right to for as good an education as we can provide and as the states can provide. Well, I guess the most important thing is to quickly talk about the reforms that we have underway now. Really big, important reforms which will transform the way in which schools are supported in the future, both government and non-government schools. That Gonski panel review that I told you about and the recommendations that they produced for government actually identified this as a really important issue, making sure that there's fairness in the way in which we support every student in school. And they basically proposed a new model for funding, one that's based on 2 things. I'll do it very quickly. A schooling resource standard, which would be the amount of money that it takes to educate a student to an acceptable capacity or level, and then looking at the things that might stop a student getting there, such as I spoke about before, whether a disability, English language proficiency, indigeneity or the like. Apply those two things together and then have that as the funding for schools right around Australia, whether they're government or non-government schools. But in the non-government school sector, where you already have parents who pay fees to send their kids to those schools, taking that into account in the funding model. I think this is one of the biggest challenges that we face as a nation, to make sure that any person in any school, regardless of where they're living, regardless of how much money their parents earn, is getting the best education that we can provide for them. And I suppose the other thing to say is that we have spent a significant amount of investment over the last couple of years in education. We've really increased the amount of money in the budget. Now, some of that went to improving school facilities, but some of it also went to having what we call national partnerships with the states, because as you know, in the states, it's the state governments that are running those school systems. And they'll be focused on three things: teacher quality, because that's actually the most important thing inside a school gate that impacts upon you and says how well you're going to do, apart from your own effort. Literacy and numeracy, because we need that to be a foundation for all students to get those basic skills. And low socio-economic communities, which goes to Alan's question about equity. We're very focused on it, and we're working through with the states now what a new funding model based on those principles might look like.
Excellent, thanks Minister. Now to a question that looks beyond kind of the four walls of the classroom and comes from two Year 12 students from Perth, and they're here.
Thanks very much, Emma. I'm Jonathan.
And I'm Anish, and we're from Perth Modern School in Perth, Western Australia. We feel that a primary aim of the education system should be to develop and apply key life skills such as leadership, teamwork, and communication in order to solve future problems and overcome challenges. However, we feel that the emphasis of the education system has instead been shifted to a more short-term, individually focused that looks more at scores rather than specific life skills. We feel that there needs to be a greater emphasis on extracurricular activities in order to create a more independent, well-rounded and articulate future generation.
So the question that we would like to pose to you, Mr. Garrett, is how do you propose to reform the principles of the education system to best develop these 21st century life skills in order to achieve the full long-term potential of our future students?
Yeah, thanks very much, guys. It's a really good question. I think the way I would answer it is to say this. We need to make sure that all students in all schools are getting the education skills that they need so that they can either go on to further study or go on to get jobs in the future. And that is a basic for us, and so that's why there is a focus, and I think it's the proper one, on literacy and numeracy, a focus on making sure we know how people are travelling through their school career. And by the way, looking at how the support that we're giving for schools is working. In other words, if it's not working so well in a certain school or an area, or perhaps in Year 3 or Year 5 or Year 7, then respond to that as we do it. But your question's a good one, because it goes to the heart of what else are you taught at schools and what do you need when you leave school to be a well-rounded person and, as you rightly say, capable of being a problem solver, an innovator. And I think the answer there is I see a lot of schools doing that already. I do see a lot of schools that do that already. Some of that comes about in the way in which children are taught or students are taught in the school, in high school. Some of it comes in the way in which, say for example, there are already existing extracurricular activities. It might be music, it might be drama, art subjects and the like. It won't surprise some of you, or well, perhaps you, but your teachers or your parents to know that I'm very keen on all Australian students having the opportunity to learn and study an art subject in their school career. And I argued very strongly when the Prime Minister had this job as Education Minister that we should include arts in the national curriculum, and that will happen. And within the arts context, I'm extremely keen for people to have the opportunity to experience and enjoy music. Not just because it's fun, which it is, but also because there's lots of information and research that tells us that it's actually very good for learning to cooperate, cooperative behaviour, problem solving, creativity, and it also helps people, particularly who are struggling at school, with concentrating and doing better in their basic subjects of literacy and numeracy. There's some fantastic work that's been done by an organisation called the Song Room in low socio-economic communities, basically taking choirs into schools and having kids start to sing and the big difference that it makes. The final thing to say is that the capabilities that I spoke about when I answered Corinda's question that are also in the national curriculum are there to help that happen as well. I don't think there's any doubt that if we know how our Australian students are doing in schools by the measurement component, that has to be balanced by making sure that as they go through their school journey, they're getting the kind of inputs and encouragement and space to become creative and confident and responsible individuals. And I expect to see more of that as we roll out the national curriculum as well.
Would you guys like to ask a follow-up question to the Minister?
No, but Minister, I'd like to say thank you very much for ensuring that education is at the forefront of policy development with the current government, so thank you.
Thanks, Jonathan.
Next up, I'm excited to announce the #1 ranked question in the forum that surged into the lead in the final hours. It was very dramatic, with more than 5,500 votes behind it. Let's hear the question from Jimmy and Sarah from Sydney.
Hi, how are you? I'm Sarah.
And I'm Jimmy. We're both year 10 students from Bonnerick High School in Sydney.
Yeah, Minister Garrett, we as students believe that if teachers and students develop a stronger bond, the effectiveness of learning in the classroom will improve. Students lose interest in their classes if they are not engaged in mutually respectful dialogue with their teachers. Many students enjoy school do so because they feel comfortable and able to talk to their teachers. Minister Garrett, how are you planning to train and equip teachers to better engage with students in mutually respectful conversations in the classroom?
Yeah, well, I think I know why it got the most votes. It's a great question. And thanks very much, Sarah, for that, and Jimmy as well. Look, we've got a very strong focus on what we call quality teaching or teacher quality, and part of that is teachers being able to have a really authentic and genuine interaction with students in the class setting. And we do know, and I know, and I think, you could go into the parliament where we had question time, and sitting right around that parliament, if you asked any one of those MPs, whichever side of the house that they were on, or even our friends from the media that are here, any of the people that are working here at the senior levels of the parliament, in the bureaucracy, a couple of people working in my office here, all of us would have, hopefully more than a couple, but certainly teachers that we remembered when we were your age, who did exactly what you said in your question, who were listening, who were responding, who made us feel valued, but also who gave us a great deal. And it's, as I said before, the teacher that makes the biggest difference in the classroom. So what are we doing? Well, we're recognising that, and we're encouraging teaching and teachers to be respected and to be recognised and acknowledged as professionals who make a huge impact on the kids under their charge. We're also proposing in the reforms that I talked about before, which would come as a national plan for school improvement. That's the characterisation that we've given it, and that's how we see it. We do actually see it as being a plan to improve every school. That one of the features of that, in terms of quality teaching, is for teachers themselves to, every year, have an evaluation and some peer and student and other feedback on how they're teaching. Interestingly, the research tells us that the majority of teachers, I think it's something like 93%, believe that they would be better teachers and that they would value that feedback. And they just don't get it at the moment. Some do, some don't. It's different from state to state. It's sometimes different from school to school. So you just think about that. Every year, a teacher, whether it's just someone who's just come out of uni, and maybe some of you are going to go and be teachers at some point. I hope that that's the case. And they're just learning, and they're just finding their way around the classroom, how to deal with behavioural issues, how to deal with difficult questions that come their way, how to manage the workload. That there's a person there that can evaluate how they're going with them. It'll usually be the principal or the deputy principal, but it can be someone else who's senior, and give them a bit of a hand and see the sort of feedback that they're getting, including student feedback. If it's a teacher who's been doing it for a long time, and perhaps they've got ingrained patterns of teaching, and maybe they're a teacher who's not always listening to those students, that can be picked up in that evaluation. I think it's going to make a really big difference. And teachers want it. They want to do it because they want to be better teachers as well. And by doing that, I think we're going to see a huge change in the way that teachers are constantly improving their teaching expression in the classroom. The other thing, just to say quickly, is that we've now got the National Professional Qualifications and Standards for teachers and for principals. And they go to some detail about how a teacher teaches effectively, which includes the listening function as well as the teaching function. I think the other thing to say is that you're at an age now where you're young adults, effectively. You're coming into that period through adolescence into young adulthood. And of course, you want to be able to have really genuine and respectful dialogue with your teachers. But teachers sometimes manage students all the way through that school setting, or say, for example, if they're a specialist teacher in a high school, they might be teaching history and they might be teaching, well, I'll use the New South Wales system, year 7 and then year 11 and then year 9. So there are some real challenges there, because on the one hand they're dealing with people that are just hitting into adolescence, on the other hand they're dealing with some of you like yourself who are coming through that and who are thinking in quite a mature way about their subject. So it's not an easy job. But I think these things that I've identified will make a very big difference, and I think that hopefully they'll answer your question too.
Sarah, did you want to follow up on anything the Minister said, or Jimmy?
No, thank you, Emma. We believe our question has been properly answered. Thank you, Minister Garrett.
Okay.
Oh, thanks, mate.
Let's move on now move on to a video question that builds on the topic of teacher motivation, but is kind of specifically focused on how we cater for individual students' needs.
Hi, my name's Opal.
And I'm Chloe.
We're currently in Year 12 at Mountain Creek State High on the Sunshine Coast in Queensland.
As students, we understand that teacher motivation is essential for an engaged, inclusive environment to be developed in our school system.
Current classroom dynamics do not accommodate for individual learning styles, abilities and disabilities.
With the national curriculum being introduced in 2014, an opportunity is established to re-evaluate current teaching methods and their effectiveness at helping the students.
Therefore, as Minister of Education, how do you plan to keep teachers inspired in order to guarantee Australian students are provided with an education catered for their needs?
Another great question about teachers. Well, just one point to correct, not a point of order, which you would have heard in there, but a point. The Australian curriculum's already being implemented. So it won't start in 2014, it started. What we do want to do, though, is implement a new education funding model nationally from 2014. So to add to the answer that I've already given previously with this question, when I've talked about teachers, a couple of other things quickly. One thing that we're looking at and we're working at is the way in which, under those national qualifications and standards I talked about, teachers are actually trained at uni or where they're learning. So we want to make sure that they're getting the kind of training that equips them to come out of the university or the training institution and into the school and to be really well prepared and keen to do that job. There's quite a lot of other things that we do as well. For example, we now have National Teachers Awards, and they're done through an organisation called the Australian Institute of Teaching and School Leadership, which advises ministers like myself and the state education ministers on teacher quality, teacher standard issues generally. And we have a series of awards that go for teachers, both teaching, say for example, in early years, primary school, high school, who show great leadership. They're fantastic awards. The award ceremony is a really, really good one. And that provides an example to people that's shared through the teacher networks as we recognise teachers who are doing a fantastic job and responding in the way in which that question suggested. The other thing that we're doing is we're actually setting as it were, a career path of recognition for teachers, which includes two components as teachers progress through those standards and qualifications of highly accomplished and lead. And we're really proposing to, and we are already working with the states, to provide more acknowledgement, including additional money for them when they reach highly accomplished and lead status. And that means that there's a way in which a young teacher can see something to aspire to, and they know that there's some acknowledgement and recognition that comes with it. The final thing that we do is that we really talk positively about schools and teachers. I mean, I didn't come into the Parliament expecting to be the Education Minister. I think it's a tremendous privilege to be a Cabinet Minister in the government. And obviously I knew education well. I went to a government primary school system, and then I went to a non-government high school system, and I was at uni here at ANU for a while, and then I finished up at University of New South Wales. My kids obviously went through school as well and have gone on to do other study, all my friends. So I know schools, but I didn't know them as a minister. And the portfolio experience has been an incredible one. Because every school I go to is different, but every school's got similar things happening in it. And that is, this is the time in life when for young Australians now, the kinds of things that we heard earlier in terms of what the foundation and what Ricky said to us about the kind of young Australians we want to see who will, at one point, be sitting here playing roles in this place, playing roles in and around this place, which are important roles, confident, creative, really understanding and knowing both what it is to make a full contribution and also leading a successful life. All of those things happen with the teachers that are teaching you at school. And they're happening right now, and they're happening in 9,500 schools around Australia, and there's 3.5 million or so young Australian students who are involved in this process. So we really are focused on education. It sits right in the middle of our agenda. It's so important for me to do the job well. It's been great hearing your questions. They were really thoughtful questions, and I was pleased to be able to answer them in a way which I hope gives you a sense of the sort of things that we've got in front of us. It's a very big agenda, and education's right at the heart of it.
Well, we do have one final question, Minister, so yes, definitely look out for that. Our final question touches on an issue that you've been pretty involved in over the years, and one that is an increasingly big issue amongst young people. Let's hear from Anu and Lara from South Australia.
Hi, I'm Lara.
And I'm Anu, and we're students at Aberfoyle Park High School in Adelaide.
We think living sustainably is crucial to ensuring a positive future for all. However, most students barely understand the importance of the issue, let alone have the skills to create change.
Education is about preparing people for their future. So, Minister Garrett, how are you going to ensure that Australian students are educated in the life skill of living sustainably?
Well, you're absolutely right, and this is a question that's pretty close to my heart, particularly one of the things that I was doing before I came in here. Look, very quickly, because I don't want to talk for too long now, I absolutely agree with you that it's important and that we need to be really focused on how to make sustainability in the education system real and how to have it applied as people are learning through their school career. Sustainability is one of the cross themes in the national curriculum. And I've actually provided a little bit of support to a coalition of organisations, including some unions, some non-government organisations and some research institutions who are really keen to see where are the crossover points between sustainability as we understand it and, say, for example, geography or science. And are there other things that can happen in the school setting which encourage people to do stuff, which increases their understanding of sustainability and what it means? In primary schools, as some of you probably know, and maybe even some of you would have had it at the primary level, you've quite often got a garden in the primary school, and teachers will explain and take kids through the whole business of preparing a garden and getting it ready and having the water tank and doing all of that. And we also support Stephanie Alexander. I don't know if you know this name, but she's a very well-known Australian cook, and she's got a great cookbook. I used one of her recipes the other night on kitchen cabinet, actually. Thankfully, it was there. It's one of the simple ones. So in the primary school setting, we do see quite a high level of awareness, particularly where schools have got things like gardens and the like in. But on sustainably broadly, there's a big challenge there for us to make sure that that theme, that Australian curriculum theme, is embedded in the way in which all schools are teaching these subjects, particularly science and particularly geography, which is where some of the really quite challenging issues around sustainability, use of materials, protecting habitat, those sorts of things are fleshed out. The other thing is that we provide support for schools. We've provided solar panels for schools, and some schools have got the opportunity to store and collect solar energy, and they'll have the meter there to tell students how it works. And I've seen some fantastic things that students are doing in schools too. I mean, some of the students get involved in the solar car race, for example. So there's quite a lot going on. But I think now that we have this specific focus on the national curriculum and this theme of sustainability and the work that I've commissioned, we can take it further.
Thank you so much, Minister. I know we'd love to continue discussing all of these issues today, but that's all we have time for, unfortunately. A big thank you to you, Minister, for coming and answering all of the students' questions. A big thank you to the students for coming here and asking the questions, and to all of the students that participated in the Student ShoutOut. A big thank you to those streaming as well. And if you want to discuss these issues further, you can always go to the Student ShoutOut Facebook page. Thanks.